everybody. This is Carmen Vega, and I'm here today with Kulsum Tasnif on April 12th. I just thought I'd mention. Kulsum, welcome, and thank you so much for being here with us. What is your ethnicity, and how old were you when you realized that you were an artist?
Oh, okay. So thank you for having me, Carmen. It's my pleasure to be here. So my ethnicity, my parents are from Pakistan, and I was born in England. I grew up between England and the Middle East in a country called Oman. So I spent my early childhood years traveling between London and Muscat, Oman. And when I was a teenager, I came to the United States. So I would say that I'm a culmination of many cultures, but my parents are from Pakistan.
Oh yeah. Well, so when you were going from Oman to, was it London?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oman to London, did you have like a sort of a dual citizenship thing happening then?
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly, yes. And so wherever I go, I will always have a British citizenship, even like I have it right now. I actually have to renew it, but technically, yeah, I will always have a dual citizenship.
Cool. So, when you came as a teenager, who came with you to, and did you go, tell me what state you settled in and where is that?
Yeah, so I came with my parents. My sister had moved before me, so we joined her. But yeah, my uncle, he was the one who sponsored us, so we came as green card holders. And so it was my oldest uncle, and we came in this tiny town in upstate New York called Portland. And it was a shock because I came from the Middle East, which is hot, like really super hot. And then coming to freezing upstate New York, where it was so cold that, yeah, I'm going to be a little gross, but when our nose would run, our snot would sneeze and would freeze within just minutes. It was that cold. So yeah.
I went to New York in March, and it was like between 26 and 40 degrees.
That sounds about right.
Being a California girl, I've never been so cold in all my days, but it was exciting. But you were used to a big city because of London, right?
Yeah.
London can be a little bit chilly sometimes, right? A little rainy.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, we got used to it, I guess. I mean, when you're that age, when you're a teenager, everything is really new. And so yeah, the weather-wise, I don't think that was my biggest challenge of coming to the state. It was definitely somewhat of a culture shock. But to answer your original question about when I knew that I was an artist, I think I feel like I was born an artist, but that's what my mom always would say. She was just like, you were born an artist. As soon as you could hold a pencil, that's when you would start drawing. And I do remember that, obviously not when I was born, but I remember picking up a pencil and just drawing. And my mom would say that the expressions that I would make on these very elementary figures were so real that she knew immediately. She was a teacher too, so she knew immediately. Yeah. And so, okay, now going back to your question about the places I lived, you just mentioned California. Yeah. So after New York, New York was the first place I came when I moved, immigrated to the States. Next was California. I spent 11 years in California, high school and college.
You did? No,
yeah.
Where in California? My students will want to know because they're Inland Empire, California.
Oh yeah. So I moved first to Anaheim, actually in Orange County, and then went to high school in Anaheim. My first job was at Disneyland. Yeah.
What did you do at Disneyland?
Well, I was a teenager. I was 16, so they would only let me be a server. So I think I worked in Tomorrowland Terrace as a server.
Oh, that's super good.
Yeah, I know. It was so amazing. I mean, I loved working in Disneyland. I actually worked there for years, and even when I was in college, I would come there to work during the summers. So it was quite a while. Yeah. And then I went to college in Davis, California, another tiny town at the time.
Davis, was it?
I went to UC Davis. Yeah.
Good. I'm a UC Riverside girl, so
Ooh, UC Riverside. That's awesome.
what the Bears you had up there? Like we were the Highlander Bears. What were you?
I can't even remember, honestly. I think it's called the Aggies, but now I don't want to get it wrong. Maybe, yeah, I'm not sure, but I was never into like, that stuff. So I was really the artist who kept to herself and like literally would not leave the art building. That was me.
Right. I mean, and it's and those programs can be quite small.
Yeah.
I don't know what year you graduated college, but I know in my graduating class we only had for our senior thesis exhibition there were 12 of us.
Yeah, it was small. It was.
Gallery space, and we were able to show our work and get it. But I mean, how big was your graduating class?
It was pretty small, and so I was quite adventurous. So you mentioned what, like, your gallery space. Yeah, so it just reminds me of the story where I was supposed to show my final, and I missed my final because I decided to do a public display of my art, and I spent all night. It was like I was dealing with inside and outside spaces. And so I said, hey, why not surpass what everyone else is doing and get my art out of the traditional art space and just go, and little did I know, which in retrospect, I should have known, I put my work, like hung it on like the most public place on campus at night. Oh. And in thoughts that, it won't be a big deal. People are used to students doing stuff. And this was my final, by the way, right? By the morning, the police had taken it all down. It was crazy.
Oh my God.
Yes, I had to go to the police, like the campus police, not like police.
So unsanctioned public art.
Yeah.
So you were actually being quite rebellious.
Oh yeah.
I mean, did what happened to your art? Did they, they gave it back to you and they just told you, shame, or what happened?
Yeah, it was a slap on the wrist for sure. I was mortified, but the whole time I was thinking, oh my gosh, I'm gonna miss my final. Like I missed my final exhibition because I did something dumb. And the most amazing thing that came out of it was my whole class met me there at the station with my professor, and that's where we held my final exhibition. It was so cool. We touched upon so many topics from inside and outside spaces to getting permission beforehand, even though, and to who to talk to, the right people, and ways to still display your art that way and be rebellious, but following the right channels in which I could have had this huge, amazing public display if only I had known who to talk to. It was one of the biggest lessons that I learned as an artist, and I have applied the lessons that I learned that day to even to this day. I picked up such good advice from my professor. Mm-hmm. And I have done these crazy, huge displays in my art career where I've done these large scale installations in spaces where I never thought I could get in, but I did because I just went through the right channels and tried to charm the right people where I had permission. Yeah.
Well, in my class, we talk a lot about, unsanctioned art in public spaces, and we look at the art of Shepard Fairey and how has been challenged on many levels by, legal, troubles that he's been in. And, we talk about Banksy and, Jean-Michel Basquiat and all the, and then there's even the people like Sarah who just use the land as, a public space. And I just think anything that's site specific and um, public art, and or even if you don't have permission, I think sometimes those are the most intriguing, that pull you in, and that even if you don't have permission right away, sometimes it becomes you can get favor, you can get notoriety, and then get permission eventually, or you can go the other way, the way that you're going now, which is like making sure you go through the right channels and talk to the right people. So either way, I mean, I tell my students, you just have to be prepared to accept the consequences of your actions, whichever thing that you do.
Yeah, I agree. All the artists that you mentioned, I just love what they do. And I have to admit that I too have this sort of rebellious streak in me where I do have this thing where, I would like to do this, maybe not get that permission. But in the end, I think if it were just me and if I didn't have kids, it'd be a different story. I could just go around, doing all the graffiti that I wanted to. But, I feel like, I
can't tell if when I get to be like a gray-haired old lady, if I'm going to engage in more risk-taking behavior or less. I could go either way.
I know, that remains to be seen. I don't know.
Kids are grown. I mean, you might want to do some.
Yeah, maybe. Why not, right?
Well, but then there's grandchildren, so I don't know. Yeah. Okay, so you realized, and your family recognized you as an artist very early on, and you were always drawing. So let me ask you: did you have were you then just growing up around friends who also liked to draw, or maybe just admired you for what you were doing?
So I grew up in a generation and a culture where the arts weren't really appreciated. Mm-hmm. The people that I grew up around were we were raised to be doctors or engineers. With Pakistanis, with Asian, with the Asian culture, it's very particular about the career paths you choose, which is doctor, engineer, and later on lawyer. And I came from a family where they were all quote, unquote professionals, and that was an expectation. But the amazing thing about my situation was that my mother, because she was a very gifted teacher, she recognized the talent and she always encouraged me. And so I did not grow up around any artists. I was literally the only artist I knew, because I think a lot of the parents were afraid that if they encouraged their kids would get distracted. And just suddenly decide to become, their biggest fear was like, oh, what if my child ends up becoming and, wants to be a photographer and won't make money? I mean, it's all related to finances. I think if the arts made more money, you would see great change in how it was perceived, at least back then. I mean, this was, 30 plus years ago, right? 30, 40 years ago, whatever.
I think that more and more careers are expanding for artists. And so what my intent always is to tell my students, you could either be unhappy in a career that's, quite lucrative, or you could be happy, and then maybe that career could be lucrative, which actually some artists are doing. And so part of why I want to bring artist interviews to them is so that they can see that there are people who are still alive, a diverse community of people who are creating art and actually successful, and are happy, and are doing what they love, and it's a meaningful expression of who they are. That's really all anybody could ask for. And I think that my students more and more are being encouraged by their families, although there's always that concern, you want to have have a backup plan, or get a degree in something, but we'll see how it goes. So when you were a developing artist, maybe you were high school, college age, What was the best advice that you received?
So my professor, Conrad Atkinson, who is an amazing artist, very well known, and I was lucky enough to have him as my professor, and at the time he was the dean of the art department at UC Davis. The advice he gave me was, eventually you're going to make it if you don't give up. If you just keep at it, at some point you will get what you want. You will reach whatever level that you want. And I have found that to be true, because I double majored in English and art. I had the backup. For the longest time, everyone thought I was going to go into law school, which is what I was supposed to do, but I decided to not do that and pursue the arts as a full-time career.
Doctorate too?
I'm sorry?
We're going to get your Juris Doctorate too?
Me?
Yeah. To go after law school, you were gonna go get your JD and all that, or
no, meaning I was supposed, after my bachelor's in art and English, I was supposed to, according to my parents, go to law school. But I didn't do that. I instead, like you had mentioned, I decided to follow my passion, which was art. I could not have imagined living in a world where I would not be doing my art full time. I would have been miserable. And that self-fulfillment, just feeling fulfilled through the arts, was so important to me. Mm-hmm. And I knew going into it that I would not be making a crazy amount of money. And those of us who go into the arts, depending on which field you decide to go in, like you mentioned, there are so many paths that you can take. And still feel very fulfilled and still feel like you're creating on a daily basis in a way that you don't feel like you're compromising yourself or your work. And for me at that time, that meant painting. Mm-hmm. And so I taught myself Arabic calligraphy. It was so dear to my heart. I actually really wanted to go off and learn Arabic calligraphy. So after my bachelor's, I thought, wouldn't it be amazing if I went to the Middle East, or if I went somewhere where someone could teach me? Because it was a completely, my art department obviously didn't train me in Arabic calligraphy, right, in Islamic art. But I wanted to sort of go back to my roots and find, and just really create that way, right? And be educated in something that really intrigued me. I found, so it was out of the question. My parents would never have allowed me to go off to anywhere, let alone that they would even, because I was in Texas at the time. So I graduated and moved to Texas. And so I found this program in Virginia where there was someone teaching Arabic calligraphy. I contacted him, and then he decided to take me on as a student. But around that same time, I had met my husband, and I ended up choosing to get married and move to Minnesota. So that didn't work out.
Minnesota, where my Midwestern people are. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Minnesota. You've been everywhere. I'm so jealous. You've lived all over the world. That's great.
I have. That is, I think, one of the biggest influences of my art. I think if you look at my work, and I've done so many kinds of art, but you'll see the influence of different cultures between living in in England, where I use a lot of motifs like roses and flowers, and those are just flowers in my backyard, the rose bushes that I would see. Wallpapers that would be, in various friends and families' houses in England, to the Middle East with that Islamic art influence, with symmetrical patterns and designs and borders, and then the influence of Conrad Atkinson in college, who was a conceptual artist and a very politically aware and politically charged artist, and that's what he encouraged us to do. So I feel like I've sort of combined all of these things in my art.
Students are going to get a chance to look at the art while we're speaking, but I'm just remembering some of your work that I've seen, and it does have all of that in there, and it's very vibrant and colorful and meaningful, and just it has sort of a power and a presence, and it's not purely decorative. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
It could be considered somewhat decorative, but it's there's more to it than that, you know, I'm just not sure. I'm just thinking now about how you're working full time doing what you love, but do you also allow for people to request commissioned artwork from you, or do you ever do anything custom, or do you just go ahead and like show what you have made and then like let people see from there, or do you have a electronic presence? Do you do any kind of digital marketing, that kind of thing?
Oh yeah, so much. You touched upon so many things. So for years, what I used to do was commissioned work. Like I would show my work in galleries, my paintings, and then I would take commissions, and the work that I would create for galleries would be different than the work that I would create for people's homes, because obviously it's a completely different genre. Maybe it would be calligraphy, but I would have to be very mindful of color schemes and basically whatever people wanted in their homes I would create for them, and that's what I did. It gets a little stressful for me now, because I get really nervous when it's so much easier when people see my work in a gallery and then just buy it, because I've done the work and clearly they like it, otherwise they wouldn't have bought it, right? Versus trying to create somebody else's vision that they have in their own head. It's difficult. Although I will say that I have yet to come across somebody who hasn't been happy, I think, or either I hope that they haven't been faking it, but all these years I have not had anyone who's absolutely hated the work that has been commissioned. So there's that. So I've had my commissioned work, and then there's the work that there's a cause. Like, for example, if there's a cause that's very meaningful to me, I won't even think about selling it. I will just come up with it knowing that, chances are people aren't going to buy this, but this means so much to me that I'm going to create something hardcore, or something that I don't think anybody would want to put on their walls. But I want to get this work out there because I want to spread awareness about something. For example, in 2015, I created a series called Journey to the Good Life. And it was about the refugee experience and what people had to do in this world to just survive when everything was taken away from them. Their homes, their security, their families, and they had lost so much. And I spent 4 years recording voices of survivors of war and illustrating and painting their stories, and just showing it in galleries. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do a master's, was so that I could learn technology. I think that was something missing in my work, because I was struggling with the audio and the lighting and things that I think would have really complemented my work at the time, like that series in 2016. But so that series was just a combination of paintings and illustrations and audio sound, where the actual people were telling their stories, because I do believe that people should be able to tell their own stories. Like, I don't know enough about anyone's life experience other than my own. And I just wanted to provide a platform. And I showed that series Journey to the Good Life for about 4 or 5 years. In fact, I'm having a show right now, actually, in North Carolina. Okay. My paintings are in Wilson, North Carolina right now. in a small gallery, which I'm very honored that this work is still being shown, and that I still get to talk about these stories that mean so much to me, and I hope the people who are willing to share their experiences. So that was one thing. And then now, this is the interesting thing. This most recent series I've done, it is a combination of both. I am able to make a living out of it and sell them, and it is so fun. Like it's called the Protest Purse. And the Protest Purse is a series in which I get to collaborate with women and listen to their stories and paint their purses. And so I basically sell these purses, and these women get to carry their messages out into the world. And I think it's so fun. And that is, I think, the perfect example of, I think, doing what you absolutely love. And for me, that's collaborating with women and storytelling. And actually, be able to say that, yeah, I just got paid, which didn't used to happen.
So are you painting on fabric, or are you painting on like other types of materials? Like, can you describe it, and can you talk about what you're using when you're painting on it too?
Of course. So it just depends. I wish I could make my own purses. Actually, that would be amazing. But I buy purses, from wherever, or some ladies provide me with their purses. So I will show you, but I will provide a photograph for your audience.
Okay.
And then what you're seeing now, hopefully they will see also. So there's this purse, for example, that I'm showing you, and it's made up of different materials. It's thread work and little pom-poms, and it's very a cultural purse. I guess it was from Pakistan. And the words that I've written on here is immigrant.
I kind of love it. Wow.
Thank you. Yep, this is my immigrant purse, and I made this one for myself. And so that was one of the words that was important to me. Now, other purses are just leather, faux leather. Some are, just different materials that are, the only requirement that I have for my purses is that it should have enough space where I can actually paint something on there, because some people have asked for full-on sentences and, 3 or 4 different words. And so I tell them, well, okay, your purse is going to have to be like a tote bag. Those are my favorite to paint on, because those are huge. And it just gives me a really great surface to work on. So materials-wise, pretty much everything. I learned embroidery. And so I would love, now that I've graduated, or almost graduated, to actually start incorporating embroidery into my purses now. I think that would be so fun.
And the calligraphic work that I've seen you do, that spoke to me, because when I was an undergraduate artist, I took Mandarin Chinese just because I wanted to use the Maobi, the brush pen, and I wanted to learn how to make words that were actually pictures, because we just didn't have that with our, whatever you call it, like Greco-Roman, alphabet system. The pictogram itself was so interesting. So can you talk a little bit more about the calligraphy that you use and how you incorporate that into a painting and into the message of your work, and what you're hoping that your viewers will see when they look at it?
Yeah, so for the longest time, I would do Arabic calligraphy. Islamic art is a whole genre in itself, obviously, and traditionally, what people create from those words that are in Arabic calligraphy are words either praising God or some kind of a spiritual message to it, and that is very traditional. Now, what I started doing for example, one of the most recent paintings that I created was the word peace. In Arabic, it's salam. In the form of two different animals greeting each other. So it says in Arabic script, salam, meaning peace, but it also has this message behind it where, we may be from different worlds, or we may be different species, or from different countries, but, look, these two different animals have found a way to connect and to interact with each other, and that, to me, is what peace means. So that's one way that I've used calligraphy in my own way, just able to convey these messages that I have, like these themes throughout my art,
That's so beautiful, so beautiful. And I know too that you, I've seen you use repetitive motifs that you change up a little bit, but so like, can you talk a little bit about how like you talked about symmetry, but maybe like texture and pattern and movement in your art? Like how do you see that as part of, how you organize your images?
Yeah, so it really does depend on what I'm doing. If it's for somebody's home, like if I'm doing a calligraphic painting for someone's home, you will most likely see a very traditional sort of Islamic art pattern, and I like to mix and match designs. So, and that very much plays into my different cultures that I've been part of. So one design may be on the outer rectangle, you'll see something more Middle East influenced. And then maybe the square inside will be a solid color, and then another square inside will be just clashing colors and patterns that are more Pakistani influenced. And so that's one way I organize things. I think intrinsically I will know what to do, and I can't explain how. Like, it's not color theory that I learned. I just put things together. In fact, I'll even use fabric in my work sometimes, just because I love texture. You mentioned texture. For years, I did a series of paintings in which they were embossed. And the technique that I used for that, I would just not only layer the paint on top of each other, I would use fabric paint and fabric, and then just create this very textured canvas, paint on top of it, and then start over. And interestingly enough, what I have done is there have been times where my painting has been so worked, and there's some paintings that took years. Like, I am not exaggerating. There was a painting I worked on for 10 years.
Us too. Yeah.
10 years I worked on this piece. And there were so many layers of paint on this. And it must have started out with, I don't know what color, and it ended up just completely different. But it was so cool because only I knew how many layers it had and what originally was written on there. And I also see it as just layers and history of my own life in that painting. And it was very hard to part with, because that was something that I could see different phases of my life in that one painting.
You lived with it. You lived with that art. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I lived with it. And then I met somebody, I'm talking about a very, very specific painting. I met someone who loved that painting so much, and she was such an amazing person. I just felt so connected to her because of how appreciative she was of the arts, that I'm like, okay, I have found the one. Yeah. She is the one, and I finally was able to part with it, and
she actually deserved it, right? She deserved it, and you knew that she would take care of it.
Oh gosh, yeah, it was so important to me that painting finds somebody who truly appreciates art, and that particular one, after she heard the history behind it. So I think that's how I organize my paintings, I guess. But now with digital art, which is what I've been doing more recently, it's just all digital. So, I hardly have to even think about texture. It's a whole different world, actually.
Well, so can you talk about are you using are you using the Creative Suite, the Adobe Creative Suite? Are you using Procreate? Are you using a tablet? Are you just scanning your work and putting it in and then, going from there? What's your process on that?
Yeah, so 3 years ago when I got into this program, which is a master's in art and design, a master's of art and design, I did not have any technical background. In fact, you would say that I'm a very non-technical person. Everything was freehand. I didn't even know what Adobe Photoshop was. I thought it was like a little app on your phone that you just put filters through, right? It was a huge shock. And so when I first started, I would hand draw everything still, and then I would scan it in. And then as I learned and got more comfortable with the technology, that's when I started moving further and further away from handmade, and then just went more and more digital. And about, I would say the summer of 2020 was when I switched completely to digital.
Oh.
Because as part of my master's, I was studying digital art, and it was like this topic that needed me to create digital work and put it out there in social media. That was what I was studying, social media, and how this new genre of art that's out there right now that I call fast art. And I wanted to study what exactly it means to be an artist in this digital age and put this work out there in this very fast-paced environment and culture that we're living in now. What kind of art is called for this new culture and these new people who don't have much of an attention span, on social media. You just swipe. And so, yeah, that's what I studied, was digital art, switched completely to digital, and immersed myself in Photoshop and learning that. And yeah, so all I use really now for my digital work is Photoshop. That's it. And After Effects. After Effects is where to add animation to my work, which I've started doing. Let me see, is that all I've done? I had to experiment with a lot while I was in this program, like Wanda VR and all that. Oh my gosh, that's too much for me. That is not me at all. But at least
it sounds like that there have been people in your life who have encouraged you, but and maybe we can also talk about the people who failed to encourage you.
Mm-hmm.
But now that you're exploring digital art, digital media and design, I actually used to teach digital communications and new media, and and my students would compete in new media, and just the technology advances so rapidly. So what I'm really interested in is you must not have any feelings about losing control of your work, because once you put it out there in the world, it's no longer, a modernist object, a single edition object that you can hold in your hand and show in a gallery and sell. It's to the nth degree out in the world, and people can take it and use it and do things to it and pass it on and share it. And so is there anything that is there a repetitive motif or a symbol or something that one could look for where we could say, oh, well, that's a Tasnif digital illustration, because for sure that's in there in all of her work.
Yeah. So this idea of my art, putting my work out there with the knowledge that it won't be my work anymore, because I was reading about this philosopher, theorist, and his name is Umberto Eco, and he has this, it's called Eco's theory of open work. And this was written, obviously years ago before. I don't think he had the digital age in mind, but it has to do with art being forever open, because you have this person who creates the work, but then you also have the audience and the viewer who brings their own meaning to the piece. And so that's why Echo considers art forever open, because the meaning is constantly changing. And I think it makes a lot of sense to me within this context of social media, where, my work is now, I could put my watermark on there, but as you know, if you've taught, Photoshop, anyone can remove my watermark if they really wanted to. Why they would go through lengths to do that, don't ask me, but there are people who have actually done that. I mean, not to my work, but I've heard that artists are really, concerned that their work and their watermark is being claimed by others as their own, and it can be changed around. So what I do now is I've really separated the two genres of work that I do. I have my slow art, which is my gallery work, which is the kind of work that I spoke about, Journey to the Good Life, and paintings that deal with serious issues, where people are going to the galleries just to see that work and to learn about me and my work. Versus social media, where, I'm just assuming that just the work that I put out there is open to interpretation, is going to be shared by many people. It's going to possibly be maybe someone out, maybe there's going to be like many people who don't even know who the artist is. And that's okay with me, because I'm creating this digital work with the knowledge of it being open to whoever, public consumption. And that is, I think, the nature of social media and this kind of work that I like to call, again, fast art, where it just goes with the culture that we're in right now. How do I keep from people taking advantage? I feel like as long as they're not selling my work, let them use it. It's out there. It's there for people to enjoy, especially, like, for example, I'm assuming that people are just going to scroll through it. No one's going to sit there and study the digital work that I'm doing, but there isn't really much to it, right? But for example, a lot of my work, digital art, gets shared by these, influencers or whatever you want to call them. And so I try to put work out there that's positive, knowing that it's going to get out there in the world. So there's always a message to it. And you asked if there's something that can tie the work to me in terms of a style. Yeah, just like my paintings, I do have these repetitive, very colorful floral patterns that clash sometimes, and busy. It's very busy. I like this busy aesthetic, very bright, colorful, and busy aesthetic.
Yeah, I love that. That's my jam. Yeah, very good.
Yeah, and so I think that's how you can recognize. Oh, and another thing that I do is I use women of color. I often use women with hijab in my work, because that represents me, and it represents, I feel like, an underrepresented population where you don't see that much work out there with women who cover. And
that was such a good segue, because I was just about to ask you that you are a rare gift in our community, that you are my first woman artist that I'm interviewing, though not the last, because I have a long list of people I want to talk to. But can you talk about what that's like? You are bringing in an important point. We didn't see women of color making art, and we didn't see ourselves, reflected in art. I mean, other than maybe being a subject of it, or like objectified or subjectified, we didn't, or it was always the artist's wife who also painted. I mean, even you're like Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo. It's like now it's like, oh, the artist's wife, she also paints, but it's like that's not even how it ever was, and women always did, and we always participated, but just haven't gotten that kind of recognition, and we haven't been brought into the fold, so to speak. So can you talk about how meaningful it is to be a woman today, and also maybe too the challenges that face artists today.
Yeah. So I think social media has been a blessing, I think, for me and my work, because gallery spaces, when I started, which was 20 plus years ago, it was very, you would hardly see brown women doing, let alone women in hijab. Even like I mentioned, in my own culture, it was not common for, women to be artists. And so for years and years, I think the biggest change that I've noticed of being a woman of color in the arts is I don't have to make my scarf the center of my art anymore. And I'll explain that. I don't know who really truly understands what I mean by that. Is when I first started showing my work, it just seemed like I would have to be very mindful of my own persona as an artist, even though I did not want people to look at me, but I wanted to look at, the painting. It was more about, I would be very conscious of how I'm representing myself, because there's so few of us at the time, right? And so I feel like people were just fascinated by hijab. I was living in Ohio at the time, and at times in Texas, where it was a very novel thing for somebody like me to be showing my work. And oftentimes the conversation would be about, why do you cover your hair? Or, and questions that I really wasn't comfortable at the time, but I felt like I had to answer them because I didn't know any better. I felt like, well, they're asking me, I have to answer. And I think times have changed now, where I'm glad that it's not about me. There are more women out there showing their work, and to me, that's like a relief, because now it can be about my work. Like 20 years ago, someone had even, and it just became so uncomfortable, where like I'm standing in front of men who are just being very sort of, and I'm not saying it was insulting. I kind of understand to an extent that there was not a lot of education there, or there was not a lot of knowledge as to Muslim women and things like that. But I appreciate the fact that times have changed, and I have the sort of not right. So it's not like no one forced me to like answer questions or be out there and things like that. But I think the culture has changed now, where it's more common. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, Journey to the Good Life was not about me as an artist and my hijab. It was about the refugees, right? And I wasn't a distraction anymore. And so,
thankfully, the work, was more important. And I'm reading right now How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi, and I don't know why, but like it's an Audible book, so I'm just like hearing the voice, and he sounds like he could be the same generation as you, as a different kind of artist, but he talks a lot about the burden of, having to represent everyone from your culture. And it's not fair, because, I mean, why should you have to not only succeed, but to shine, all the time? I mean, in order to be like taken seriously, or to not have to answer those questions because of your uniqueness, like you're like it's a novelty or to someone, or they need. It sounds like you're encountering a lot of people who are maybe like older than you. Am I right?
Yeah. So this is in the past for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this I was encountering at the time, and from obviously a different culture. Even, and things really changed after September 11, as you would imagine. So pre-September 11, it was not, I don't think there was no animosity. So I never felt unsafe, or I never felt like I was, I would think, oh, I wish people would, not, but I still felt like comfortable, like answering in that sense. Things changed after September 11. First of all, no one wanted Muslim artists in their galleries anymore. I mean, I remember the day of 9/11, my work was in a gift shop / gallery, and I had actually sold several paintings, and I get this really terse phone call from the receptionist, and she just left a message asking me to pick up my work immediately. And I was so confused because I had still had, I think it was 2 weeks left to showing my work there. I didn't ask any questions because I kind of knew what was going on without anyone really telling me. You know how you know, right? It was just a very devastating time. It was very scary. I went to the shop, and I think the most heartbreaking thing, and I don't think I'll ever forget this, is my painting, which was Arabic calligraphy. It was wrapped in brown paper. They did not want anyone to see that it was Arabic writing. And it was heartbreaking to me because, even more so, the words, it said peace. The words in Arabic were salam. How ironic. And it was such a heartbreaking moment for me that it's like the first time I ever really questioned my Americanness. Suddenly I was this, outsider, when I never felt like an outsider before in my life. I was an immigrant. I came to the States, and I always felt very welcomed, and that was like the first time where I felt like me. It just felt personal, but I knew it wasn't, though. I knew it wasn't personal, but it just felt that way. And it took me years to sort of feel confident again, like that my art and me was welcomed. I didn't feel that way for many years, and that was not the case for many years. People did not want visibly Muslim artists.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is the case, and whether the young people today know it or not, that, I remember my very, very best friend was a West Indian girl growing up, and she had, beautiful brown skin and beautiful braids and a bindi, and, so would sometimes wear a sari. And I was just mostly jealous of her because I didn't really like the way the makeup looked on me when we were in dance together, and so I always liked the way that, that her makeup turned out. And at the same time, I guess her family put a lot of pressure on her to draw as well as I did, but they needed her to know all of her, times tables to 1,000, but they also were like, why can't you draw as well as Carmen, and that became a lot of pressure for her. So we had this kind of, dynamic going on. But I noticed that she got pushed into the medical field, too.
Surprise.
Like we were talking about earlier, but I guess what people don't realize is that your gallery representative was showing your art and was probably very comfortable with you as a human being, but when they had to make that a part of their own story, their own public persona, they weren't willing to take on the obligation for their patronage for the public. I've noticed a lot, people will, they'll root you on until they don't root you on anymore. For whatever underrepresented group it is. I mean, people will be like, go LGBT community, you guys are great. But then I notice that there's always a backing off point where people are like, yeah, but that's not what I'm about and all that. So you had these bad experiences, but I have a feeling that the people just weren't willing to put their own their own skin in the game. They weren't willing.
And I understand that. Listen,
go far into it.
I get it, and I understood that, and I would be fine. But I think it's also the manner in which people deal with each other. I think had somebody just come to me and dealt with me in a human way, in a way that was maybe kinder. Covering up my art felt like they were covering me up, and sort of erasing me.
Yeah.
And I think that's just my general take on that. Is, we're all human beings, and I would have understood, and I get it, had somebody had, her message been like more kind and less terse, that come pick it up, and I think that's what has stayed with me. I think that it would have played out very differently had there been more compassion, I think. And I think, but you know what? There's always a good thing that comes out of this. Even though I do tell the story, and every time it hurts, every time I tell it. But at the same time, I think it teaches you how you want to be. The kind of person you want to be, and I'm very mindful now of like how I deal with people and artists, and never want to make anyone feel like they don't belong, and I think those are the lessons that you learn, even you and me and your students, like things will happen in life where it'll hurt, but then there's always something good that comes out of it, and something that we can teach others. And I hope that, your students hear my story and think, we should treat people in a way that shows kindness, and
we should make people feel comfortable to take risks in their own genre and all that. I know that even don't ever feel bad about the shop owner, because my own family turned my art upside down when they had guests coming over, and I didn't even know how to take that because his fans.
I'm sorry you went through that.
Wait, her art got a little controversial, we don't want to have to answer for that, kind of thing. So I can appreciate that a lot, and I can appreciate, like how it still gets to you sometimes. But yeah, we need to, I have a sign on my classroom door, and it says, art should disturb the comfortable and comfort the disturbed.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started thinking about it, much later. And I started thinking, well, if you disturb the comfortable, and then they're disturbed, but then you can make art to comfort them too. It's not just that you're making art to comfort disturbed people. It's like that. People, and then you're comforting them too, because I think artists, we are the message makers, and we are the voice of our our period in time, and our people that we come from, and all that. So oh my gosh, I'm so thankful that we got to talk. We've known each other for several years now. We never have been able to meet like this in this kind of Zoom format. I'm so thankful, and I'm sure I forgot to ask you something, and so I'm just going to open it up and say, what is something else that you would like people to know that I failed to ask?
Oh my gosh, I think we've covered so much. So many wonderful topics. Your questions were really great, and I was so comfortable talking about everything. I don't think that there's anything. I mean, I feel like we've covered so much. Yeah.
Great. And so you mentioned social media. I know that my students will want to find you somehow. So what are you actually, where can they see your work beyond what we're going to show them?
Of course, find me on Instagram. My handle is Kulsum TS. KULSUM TS.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, that's my Instagram. I would love for them to follow me and see my work and reach out. Yeah. If your students want to ask any questions, and send me a message and say, that we're from Carmen's class, and
Great. Well, we're so thankful, and I love North Carolina. I've been there. It's very slow paced.
Yes.
I hate to say that whatever you're going through in your master's program, I hope that it's at a slower pace than they do things in California.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Time to really think about who you are and what you want to do. And I love that you're venturing out into digital art. That's so inspiring for me because I didn't know that until we talked today. So
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.